Everyone, I'm Paul Moran from Grand Opportunity USA, or Go USA, the host and moderator for today's OppScore Debate, with or without the candidates, for the Secretary of State race in Michigan. With us is Republican nominee Kristina Karamo, who's running to unseat two-term Secretary of State Democrat Jocelyn Benson, who has not accepted our debate request after multiple attempts to reach her office. Kristina will instead debate Benson's record, platform, and positions as found in the public record, on her website, and in the media. Information that's also found in her OppScore rating produced by Go USA. Ingrid Centurion is joining us to read out Benson's record, as she has refused to join the debate to discuss and defend her positions for the voters of Michigan. Go USA is a nonpartisan 501c4 nonprofit organization, and the OppScore, short for Opportunity Score, is the first, one and only unbiased political credit rating system that simply shows which politicians are working in support of the Constitution and the will of the people, and who is working against us. The app is free to use and was developed to give voters an easy, fast, and better way to assess candidates for office before they cast their vote, based on the issues that they care most about. As we say at Go USA, we're the voice of the forgotten 80%. And we like to say it's not left versus right or red versus blue. Really, it's them versus you. So now for the debate rules. I will ask a series of 10 questions of the candidates. Candidate Kristina Karamo will go first, and Ingrid will then speak for Democrat Benson's positions, each having up to 2 minutes to respond to each question. At the conclusion of the responses, I will briefly respond to identify whether the candidate is supporting or opposing the Constitution and the majority will of the people, and then move on to the next question. So let's let the games begin, and I'd like to introduce Kristina to the audience. And Kristina, can you give you a bit about your background and why you're running for office and why this is so important?
Yes, thank you, John Paul, for having me on. So my name is Kristina Karamo, and I'm the Republican nominee for Michigan Secretary of State. And what we are fighting for in Michigan is our voters' rights. Our voting rights are so critical. They're the only way that we, the people, maintain control of our government, and they are necessary for our freedom. My background is in education. I also went to theology school. I have a master's in Christian apologetics. So it's safe to say that running for Secretary of State was not in my purview, wasn't in my focus. I was, however, a very active citizen politically, because our civic duty does not end at the ballot box. So it's critical that we're watching what our elected officials do once we get them in office, and those who are doing things either illegal, corrupt, or that are opposing our constitutional rights, we have to ensure that we remove them from office. So that was where my focus was. However, in 2020, I was one of the poll challengers at the TCF Center, and I saw illegal activity. And what was very disturbing was not just illegal activities we saw, but then the cover up afterwards, the attempt to demonize citizens for reporting what we personally witnessed, and the lack of investigation into our claims. So therefore, after personally witnessing that, in addition to many other individuals, I decided I had to run for Secretary of State, because it is frankly a matter of national survival that we secure our elections.
Wow. Well, I can say as a voter, I'm glad to see you running and challenging Secretary Benson. And it's so important, as you described. So thank you for your intro. I'm going to pull up Jocelyn Benson's website, because she refuses to debate. So we're going to introduce her ourselves, because she does not want to speak to the voters, in our opinion. And everybody should do these debates. It's a cornerstone of our democracy. So Jocelyn Benson is an American politician, jurist, and former academic administrator. She's the 43rd Secretary of State of Michigan. Benson is a former dean of Wayne State University Law School, and she was a progressive political activist at Wellesley College here in Massachusetts, where she had studied prior. She has received the endorsement and financial assistance of the Secretary of State Project, a 527 political organization whose purpose, according to its own website, was wresting control of the country from the Republican Party. Okay, that's their mission, and it's also that is funded by globalist George Soros-backed Democracy Alliance. She's received support from Soros-backed groups for years, and her campaign has even received maximum contributions from Soros family members, like Andrea Soros, the daughter of George Soros, this past August. So that's just a bit about her background, and she should be here debating. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Any incumbent who doesn't want to face a live event can't be trusted. One of the things for our campaign is we believe that any person running for public office, especially incumbents, but anyone running for public office needs to open themselves up to public scrutiny. So that's why we have decided to participate in this event, and others like it, where people can ask questions and it's not scripted.
Great. Well, thank you. We appreciate it. You've got guts and you have nothing to fear, unlike Benson, apparently. So question number one, do you support the U.S. Constitution and believe that everyone has the right to vote, both legal citizens and non-citizens of the United States?
The constitutional right to vote is to protect American citizens. The reason why non-citizens are not allowed to vote isn't because we hate or dislike them, is that all countries allow those who have invested interests, who have proven invested interest and actually live in the country to make decisions for that country. Our Constitution is clear that we, the people, the citizens of America, must be the only ones who are voting in our elections. Additionally, when it comes to what's going on right now, the Biden administration is actually suing the state of Arizona to prevent them from checking the citizenship status as they register people to vote. Now, here's the other challenge. The individuals who are trying to make it easy for non-citizens to vote won't openly tell you this. That's deception. If I openly support something, then they need to state it and make the case for it without concealing the fact that they're actually doing it without being open advocates for it. How do I know this is happening in Michigan? There have been cases where non-citizens have been registered to vote. And these are people who did not register themselves to vote. They were registered to vote unbeknownst to them, because in Michigan, when you go into a Secretary of State's office, you are automatically registered to vote unless you opt out of it. However, the Secretary of State does have information and has the ability to know a citizen versus a non-citizen. And we've seen many instances where people have come forward who are in America legally but aren't citizens, and they've been registered to vote unbeknownst to them. So our Constitution protects the rights of American citizens. That doesn't mean we don't care about other people, but non-citizens do not have a constitutional right to vote, nor should they.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I think you'll see in a moment, our research shows that the vast majority of Americans agree with you on this point. Okay, we're going to move it over to Ingrid to talk for Benson, who refuses to participate.
Yes, so throughout her many public statements, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson has stated strong support for the Constitution, rule of law, and what she calls protecting our democracy. Benson even wrote a book titled Secretaries of States, Guardians of the Democratic Process. However, in 2020, without state legislative approval, Benson changed election law by forcing all local clerks to mail out ballot applications to every name on Michigan's outdated voter rolls to non-residents and deceased voters. This caused numerous mistakes and glitches across the state. Some ballots were not delivered on time due to technology glitches and human error. Residents reported unexpected mail-in ballot applications bearing the names of former residents and dead voters. In August of 2020 election, 10,000 return ballots were rejected. There is evidence of non-citizens, non-residents, and deceased people voting, for which Secretary of State Benson has not acknowledged or pledged to fix, which can only mean that she in fact supports non-citizens voting.
Okay, thank you for speaking for Benson. And I bet you she was wishing she was here right now, because she doesn't like this information getting out there. And you're right. They may not ever mention that they want non-citizens to vote, but all of their actions prove that they're trying to make it easier for non-citizens and illegals to vote, which should disenfranchise you as a voter every time that happens. And the vast majority of Americans statistically are against illegal citizen people voting, because it disenfranchises every legal vote. Thank you, Ingrid, for that backup about Benson. Okay, thank you, Kristina. We're going to go to the next question. Do you oppose all forms of identity politics, including victim politics, separating people into opposing groups along racial, ethnic, and gender identity lines?
Yeah, the thing about it is that we are Americans, And we need to be focusing on what unites us, which is the fact that we're all human beings. That's the one thing that every human being ever existed has in common. And why is that a significant point to make? Because public policy should be made on that premise. I do not like when we focus on the things that make us different. It's nothing wrong with acknowledging the fact that we have our differences. I mean, the most beautiful color is a rainbow. So it's great that people have their differences. The problem becomes is that you see people wanting to siphon people into these bubbles to be at each other's throats because we have differences or we have areas where we don't agree. When in reality, our Constitution is designed to protect the rights of every individual, irrespective of what categories we may find ourselves in. Because when we start making the categories that we exist in be the premise for laws and public policy, that creates a situation where we can then disenfranchise other people and not actually be about serving the people of this state. So I don't like to engage in that, because also it creates a scenario where it covers for corruption, and it creates a scenario where oftentimes citizens are being disrespected for concerns that they may share, and they just get marginalized because they don't have the opinion that someone says because they belong to that group they should have. So it's really critical that we allow objectives, truth to govern public policy and the decisions we make.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And again, solid answer. Thank you for that. And the majority of Americans, we say the 80% would agree with you on what you just described. Ingrid, can you talk about Benson's position on this?
Sure. Benson, like the Biden administration and progressive members of Congress, have been all in and in her support of divisive identity politics in the state of Michigan. She was recently endorsed by the Human Rights Campaign, or HRC, the left's radical pro-child, transgender, and LGBTQ activist group. Benson was on the board of directors at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has a history of weaponizing its purported hate group list by adding many mainstream conservatives to this list, recently including Dr. Ben Carson. It has recently faced accusations of racism, corruption, and sexual harassment, and is a peddler of hateful anti-American and anti-Christian ideologies. While it regularly attacks Christians and pro-America groups as hate groups, it refuses to label the violent and radical Antifa as a hate group. Benson has stoked racial division. She's endorsed kneeling to the American flag during sporting events. Benson said she wanted to dismantle systemic racism in voting, of which there is no proof.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. And again, this is the stuff that she would rather the public not know or not hear. And I'll even say from a personal experience, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign store in Provincetown, Massachusetts, threatened to shoot me dead, literally in front of a witness, because I was a conservative Republican in their store. And you're not allowed to be both gay and conservative, or they think you should be shot dead. So that's a hate group if I've ever seen it. So you have that added to her other radical ideologies, and she's all in for this very, very divisive identity politics. And we thank Kristina for standing up against such absolute violence and nonsense. So thank you. And we're going to, in the interest of time, we're going to go to question 4 next. Okay, so great. Sorry. So the next question is, since the COVID emergency and mandated shutdowns, the Michigan Secretary of State branch offices that process driver's licenses have required pre-booked appointments and have stopped all walk-ins at branch offices. What's your position on this?
We need both walk-in and appointment services because the life of Michiganders are so dynamic. Oftentimes, people need that strict appointment because they need to be in and out at a certain time. However, there's also cases where someone may have a house fire and they need to get into the Secretary of State, or they sold a vehicle, or they have bought a vehicle at an auction and need to get in, say, a business owner and register that vehicle right away. They don't have time to get an appointment. The issue is, especially in densely populated cities, getting an appointment can be very difficult. Also, with the appointment-only system, considering that in order to see the secretary, our visit to the Secretary of State is because we're legally obligated to do so, it creates a situation where a lot of our seniors and low-income community members who may not have internet access, or some seniors who may not have the necessary skills to utilize certain services regarding computer making appointments online, that can create a situation where these people are disenfranchised. So that's why the walk-in system is so critical, because this is something that this is not like a privilege to go into the Secretary of State. This is something I'm legally obligated to do. And also, utilizing online services isn't something available to many people who are low income because they're unbanked and underbanked. And not all of our kiosks allow the acceptance of cash. So protecting the walk-in system is going to be very, very important to ensure that all Michiganders can utilize those services that they're required to participate in by law.
Great. Well, I think these are positive things that Michigan, the citizens of Michigan will want to see when you become the Secretary of State if you win in November. So thank you for your response on that. Ingrid, can you explain Jocelyn Benson's position on this?
Yes, Secretary of State Benson campaigned in 2018 with a promise that people can get in and out of the branch offices in under 30 minutes. She has utterly failed to deliver on this 30-minute guarantee. Secretary of State Benson has refused to change this outdated policy to require pre-booked appointments, a policy she wants to keep indefinitely, which has put marginalized people at risk and caused unnecessary long delays for both citizens and businesses in Michigan. In May 2021, a review checked with the earliest appointments were at several branches, and we found out that Detroit's were booked all the way to September 14th, a 4-month wait, and other cities had waits of more than 2 months. The Detroit News probed the next day appointment option, and they found it took 2 or 3 days of attempts at 8 a.m. and noon to successfully secure an appointment at the Secretary of State office's branch.
Okay, thank you. And in other states, they call them RMVs and DMVs, but it's always the joke is if you want to see government control of anything, look how long the wait is at the RMV or DMV. So she brags about the 30-minute or 20 minutes she's trying to get, but also if you have to wait 2 or 3 months to get in, and you can't get in because there's no they don't take cash, or all these other things that disadvantaged people can't get in. This is an atrocity that she wants to make this permanent. So I can tell you, everybody in the country would agree with that. Okay, thank you very much, Ingrid, for that response. Okay, Kristina, we're going to go to the next question. We're actually going to combine questions 5 and 6 together, because it's really very much the same subject. So, do you believe there is an election integrity and security crisis in our country and the state of Michigan today? And do you support voter ID laws? And the second question about that question, part of that question is, do you believe that that the elections have always been free of fraud and tampering, or have you had reason to believe that there was election security issues in the past as well?
Yeah, to that point, when we think of our voting rights, they exist in 3 parts. You hear a lot of people who call themselves voting right advocates, but they talk about ballot access and ignore the other aspects of our voting rights. Our voting rights have 3 elements: ballot access, ballot security, and stopping illegal ballots from being cast. And the challenge we see right now is that the other elements of our election process our voting rights are not being secured. So what difference does it make if I can get to a ballot and mark it if my ballot isn't then secured and tabulated accurately? And then if you allow an illegal ballot to be cast, you just nullify the vote that I have cast. So this is the challenge we are seeing right now, and I believe it's absolutely under attack. We just had a judge rule against Jocelyn Benson last week regarding her illegal edicts to poll challengers that suppressed their ability to oversee the election process. We also saw an arrest of the CEO of a company called Connect here in Michigan, who was storing data from Michigan, from not just Michigan, excuse me. He was a Michigan-based company, but we used it obviously here in Michigan, other states as well. This company was storing data from our elections on servers in China. That is very, very, very troubling. Additionally, our governor gave that company $300,000 of our tax dollars. There is very little chain of custody procedure regarding how absentee ballots are handled. We saw surveillance footage of individuals signing multiple absentee ballots, which is illegal. You cannot sign another person's absentee ballots. And we can go over example after example. My opponent is claiming that there will be violence and disruption on election day, has not provided a police report or any corroborating evidence for that claim. If that was true, which I strongly believe it's not, I was, as Secretary of State, will be contacting the Michigan State Police. I would not just go on television and talk about it. I would actually create some action to keep people safe. And she has yet to done that. So either A, she's just lying, or she's incompetent. Also, to your question regarding voter ID, we have to have ID to identify that actual legal Michigan residents are the only ones who are voting. And also, when people claim that there are individuals who don't have an ID, well, it is a responsibility of the Secretary of State to ensure that people have an ID. So it sounds like my opponent is failing in her job. It needs to be replaced. It needs to be replaced. That's just a fact. So either you don't remove voter ID requirements, and it's also important to point out that people need an ID to do more than vote. People need IDs to do all kinds of things. Right. So it's really important that we have IDs. And also, to your other part of your question, has there always been fraud? Absolutely. I mean, the reality is this. People are people. And if you look through human history, people have committed atrocious things in the name of power. So if people have committed atrocious acts in the name of power, like homicide, why wouldn't people engage in fraud in the name of power? So we have to secure our elections. It is a matter of national survival.
Yes. And I to interject, I appreciate your positions on that, and I find it interesting that we're gonna have her response in a moment from Ingrid, but for her to claim, for Benson to claim these are the most secure elections in history, and all of this, with all of this, these have all of the proof that you just cited, in addition to the fact that she was just struck down just days ago by a judge that said she drastically overstepped her authority, trying to restrict poll challengers from doing their jobs. I mean, what does that sound like? I mean, what does that sound like to the public? Poll challenger, you can't question this, or you're going to, and she tried to control that illegally, circumventing the law on that. So very, very shady, very, very shady. So thank you. Let's see what Jocelyn Benson's, not representative, because Ingrid is speaking just for her record. Ingrid.
Yes, Benson has repeated claims that the 2020 election was the most secure in history, and has repeatedly called any challenge to the current Michigan election laws, any questioning of the 2020 election, a threat to our democracy. She has lobbied to the U.S. Senate to pass H.R. 1 for the People Act. This act would create a federal right to a mail-in ballot, no excuse necessary, ban state voter ID laws, force ballots received up to 10 days after the election to be accepted, and unconstitutionally strip states' rights to run elections with a federal takeover of elections. Benson has been consistently hostile to Michigan voter ID laws. Voter ID has the support of 80% of the public, which Benson is actively defying. While Secretary of State Benson has been firm on her stance that Michigan elections are extremely secure, free, and fair, she has failed to remind the public of her opinion of elections in prior years, when she questioned the results and the integrity of prior elections. Benson has refused to accept the results of every presidential election that the Republicans won this century. In 2010, Benson authored a book arguing that the secretaries of state wield influence over the implementation of election rules. In May 2010, Benson suggested that the secretaries of state in Florida in 2000 and Ohio in 2004 changed the outcome of the election to the Republicans. In her book, Secretaries of State, Benson associated Florida Secretary of State Katherine Harris with nefarious plots to work behind the scenes to affect the outcome of elections. Benson has floated the theory that electronic voter machines could be hacked. Then in 2004, the election occurred. Allegations swirled, questioning whether electronic voting machines could be hacked. And in April 2018, Benson argued for post-election audits of the 2016 election.
Okay, so I'm going to bring Kristina up on this because we're going to see. I have to comment on this. I'm sure you probably want to comment on this. That's the smoking gun. I mean, she has the gall to say that anybody that disagrees with that thinks that there's any problem with election integrity is a threat to our democracy. First, we have to correct her. It's a democratic republic. It's a constitutional republic. It is not a democracy. She needs to understand that. If she's such a scholar, she doesn't know how to speak. And secondly, here she is, over and over talking. For 20 years, she's been challenging the results when Republicans win. So apparently, it's only okay to speak about if your candidate loses, right?
Yeah, that's the issue with her. She has, like you said, questioned the integrity of the machines, questioned the integrity of elections when Republicans win. Again, this is a person who has no integrity, no scruples, and it appears that she only went to law school so she can find ways to help herself break the law.
Yeah. Well, she actually writes about that in her book, saying that the Secretary of State is the most powerful position in any position in the country. Allowing you to broad interpretation of law means they can make their own laws. That's what she basically says in her book from 2010. So Michigan voters, that's what you're getting if you get someone. She is, by the definition, a tyrant. That's the definition of tyranny. And when she's talking about protecting democracy, here's the tyrant talking about protecting. It just makes no. That's like a bank robber saying, "Secure your money in the bank." It's nonsense. Total nonsense. Okay, so thank you. Again, in the interest of time, we're going to go. We covered some of. We kind of overlapped some questions. So rather than being redundant, we're going to go to question number 8. And the question is: do you believe that unrestricted, no excuse absentee voting is safe and secure? Is as safe and secure a method of voting as voting in person at the polls? And do you think that convenience for voters trumps safe and secure elections?
Yeah. So the thing about it, we have a constitutional right to absentee voting, but it is too broad. I think there was a big mistake in 2018 to have no reason absentee voting, because the issue with absentee voting is not that the concept is bad, but it's just the practicality, considering human nature, opens the door and it makes it very easy. If someone wanted to manipulate another person's vote, they could. That's the problem. So, for example, in 2022, during the August primary, during a county canvass in Wayne County, one city in Wayne County, they discovered a bag of ballots that had been tabulated. Now, if you're voting in person, that kind of stuff isn't going to happen because you feed the ballot into the tabulator yourself. So that's the challenge with absentee voting. There's no chain of custody protocol. That way we can keep an account for those ballots every step of the way. It's just too easy to grab somebody's vote and toss it and no one know about it. That's the challenge with absentee voting. So, I'm not saying we do away with the absentee process, because our overseas voters, like our soldiers, they need it. You have handicapped people and elderly people, and, some people who may be forced to leave town for business, and you don't want to see their right to vote denied. So we have to protect absentee voting. It's just that we have to ensure that we go about it differently. That way we're not just having millions and millions and millions of them. And then also the fact that we need a more improved chain of custody procedure for when it comes to absentee votes, to ensure that folks' votes are secured.
Okay, great. Thank you for your response. And again, while most Americans want the flexibility of absentee voting, they also want to make sure, more importantly, that their vote is secure, it's safe and fair, and there's no cheating. Americans don't like cheaters, and we'll have Ingrid reply for Benson, to remind the audience, Secretary Benson has not shown up. She will not debate. She will not protect their democracy, even though it's a republic, because she will not go and debate, which is part of our cornerstone of democracy. So once again, hypocrisy at its finest. Ingrid.
Yes, well, Benson has worked to implement policies that made our elections less secure, not more. With her focus on mass mail-in voting, mail-in ballots are the ballots most vulnerable to being altered, stolen, forged, fraudulently submitted by non-qualified voters or bad actors. In February 2019, without approval of the legislator, Benson began implementing no reason absentee voting that she claims is 100% safe and secure, despite opinions otherwise. In February 2019, Benson also pushed for automatic same-day voter registration and began pushing for ballots to be counted that were received after Election Day. A state appeals court had to intervene to block this effort by Benson.
Okay, so again, here we are with the reality that safe and secure elections are best protected by in-person voting, which they made they made them much more insecure. So that's where we're at. And again, the majority of voters agree with Kristina's position on this, not Secretary Benson's. So we'll wrap up. I know we're tight on time. Is there anything else you'd like to say? I'd like to show your opportunity score on the screen for a moment right before we go. And here it is. So, well, first of all, here's Jocelyn Benson. She gets a negative 2.4 out of 5, which means on the scale from -5 to +5, Benson gets a negative 2.4, which is one of the worst scores we've seen. And that means on the vast majority of issues, she's working against you, the American people, and against the Constitution. We just touched upon a few things today that make that very clear. If you look at Kristina's score, congratulations. You get a 4.2 out of 5, which was one of the highest scores we've seen. That means on the scale of -5 to +5, you're working in the interest of the voters of Michigan and the American people, and for the rule of law and the Constitution. So that's the meaning of the score, and we encourage people to check it out before they vote for any of their elected candidates for federal office and for state offices like yours this election cycle. And is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience before you go? I wanted to thank you again for your time today. Your campaign, 2 more weeks to go to run toward victory, and we're supporting you not because you're Republican and not because you're cool, and you talk about because you are on the side of the voters and the Constitution, which are the benchmarks of the system we have here at GOUSA.
Yeah, thank you, John Paul, again for having me on. Our voting rights are so critical that it's the only way we maintain control of our government. If you look at our Declaration of Independence, it states that the government's instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's the only way we protect our freedom. And my opponent has time and time again proven that she is a habitual lawbreaker. She not just breaks the law, but she just deceptively and just so calculatedly manipulates the public and gaslights the public into thinking she's trying to protect them, while she breaks the law and demonizes and is in cahoots with our authoritarian attorney general to put people in jail for speaking truth about election fraud. She's not a liberal. We have long past the time of a conversation that's needed between conservatives and liberal. This woman is an authoritarian posing as a liberal, and she needs to be removed from office so our children and grandchildren can inherit freedom.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, thank you for fighting and for standing up for the people. You're very brave. I know how hard it is to run for office. And again, just so you feel that much better about it, according to the data, you have the support of about 4 out of 5 people. So on the issues, you could be sleepwalking in the middle of the night and cross that line if people, and win if people actually voted on the issues, because nobody would support her if they knew the truth. That's why they won't debate. That's why she won't debate. So thank you for coming on, and I'm glad we could have this debate with or without the candidate. Okay.
Thank you. God bless, John Paul.
Thank you, and God bless, and good luck in 2 weeks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. So again, thank you all for watching and joining us here for the OppScore debate with or without the candidates for the critical race of Michigan Secretary of State. We thank again Republican nominee Kristina Karamo for joining us, the Karamo campaign, Ingrid Centurion for speaking for absent Secretary of State Benson, and special thanks to our great core of hardworking pro-America volunteers and our generous donors at GOUSA, where we unabashedly stand for American values and the voice of the forgotten 80%. We are producing more debates like this in the next couple of weeks for candidates all over the country. So be sure to check them out and support politicians who support your values and interests as detailed in their OppScore rating. Find us at go-usa.us to learn more, donate, and search over 500 candidates we have scored. And be sure to vote and vote smart this election. And remember, it's not left or right or red versus blue. Really, it's them versus you. Take care, and we'll see you at the polls.